Hello, and welcome to Badger Talks. I'm Veronica Rickard, the National Media Relations Specialist at UW-Madison. Today, we'll be talking about managing personal finances during the pandemic, and J. Michael Collins is joining me today. He is a professor and director of the Center for Financial Security at the School of Human Ecology, and he's been following the news very closely with an eye on how it's affecting household finances. Mike, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Veronica. I'm happy to be here.
So, Mike, a lot of us have never been through anything like this before. It's hitting us on a lot of levels, including, of course, our finances. And I'm wondering if, from your perspective, though, even though this is uncharted waters, if there are basic rules that can help us weather this storm financially that we can turn to.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, the financial shock of the quarantine and everything else that's involved with this is, in some ways more anxious, makes them more anxious than the pandemic itself. We have been through economic shocks before. Many of us remember the recession in 2008, and many people lost jobs in that and lost home values and lost asset values in their retirement. So we've been through these kinds of shocks before. I think what's different about this time is that it's happened so suddenly. When in February, pretty much everybody thought everything was great. Their jobs were stable. The economy seemed to be doing well. And within a month, it's like we hit a brick wall. And, the record numbers of unemployment and lots of people really nervous about their finances. So, I think we shouldn't panic, just like we shouldn't panic about the pandemic. We shouldn't be panicking about our finances, but it does require people to be mindful and take the steps they need to take to feel better about where they are with their financial well-being.
Right, and we hear about having emergency savings, and I imagine that's for times just like these. But if we don't have those savings right now, or we are stretched in other ways, what should we be doing? What should we be prioritizing in terms of saving or not saving right now?
Yeah. For a lot of people, emergency savings was hard to do even when times were good. And so now's the time to break the glass on that emergency fund to try to bridge those gaps that are needed. Obviously, when bills are due, you have to make priorities about what to pay for first. Some creditors, lenders, mortgage lenders, others are willing to defer payments or, be soft on deadlines, and others aren't. And so, obviously paying what's due to the best of your ability is a key thing. For people who don't have any emergency savings and don't have any income coming in and aren't able to get other kinds of support, it does mean, unfortunately, trying to look at other kinds of assets, whatever it might be. Maybe they have to sell some investments. Maybe they have to take out loans. And, that's very, very difficult for a lot of people to do. And so, this is a time when we really try to help people to try to come up with a plan so that, in 3 or 4 months, they can dig out of this hole that they might be in now.
3 or 4 months sounds optimistic. What do we do if this goes on and on? Is there a strategy for the long term?
Yeah, no, I think, for people who have lost a job, there is, and if they're able to get through the unemployment process and apply for unemployment benefits, there are extended benefits through the end of July that will help a lot of people keep going. If this goes past July, then hopefully there'll be another round of supports like that. But I think that's going to be a real challenge. I think the other challenge we see are for people who work in small businesses or own small businesses or are self-employed. Again, there's programs available, but they're all pretty short term. So mostly what we're doing right now is banking on some sort of return to normalcy in the economy come the fall. And, if that doesn't happen, then I think then we're going to have to look at a whole nother series of policies and programs to try to address those issues.
Let's talk about retirement, because that's an area that has a lot of people very worried. I imagine particularly if they're thinking of retiring in the next year or two, but how should we be reframing the way that we think about retirement right now?
Yeah, I think this is something we always talk about when we teach financial planning is you're getting closer to retirement. You don't want to be invested heavily in the stock market. You want to have, safer assets that don't fluctuate as much. And I think there's a lot of people who are getting close to retirement. They were seeing, the value of the stock market go up. And so they were heavily invested in stocks. And then, in a week, they lost a third of their value for some folks. So, this really does emphasize how much you have to be planful about retirement and sort of, for people who are more involved in cash or other kinds of less volatile investments, they're in better shape right now. one thing we don't want to encourage people to do is tap those retirement funds to make ends meet. Try to leave those alone. Those should be the last resort. Even though there are some provisions that came through the CARES Act recently that allow people to use their retirement as an emergency fund, really not doing that, because it does cost you in terms of your future growth of those assets that you want to have in retirement. There certainly are going to be people who are going to have to delay retirement. Retirement may, instead of being in 3 years, maybe in 5 years. So, in the long run, they'll still be able to reach their retirement goals, but it probably means some delays for a lot of folks.
We've been talking about how times are tough for a lot of people, and it could be that we have to do something we would never do. We might go to a relative and ask to borrow some money, or we might have someone coming to us asking us for some financial help. Do you have any rules of thumb for how to handle a situation like that?
Yeah, I think if that happens, you should feel like that's normal. We see that a lot. It's actually the number one source that people go to when they have an emergency, are friends and family. So, that is kind of the social network that we're in. And so, it's not abnormal to have those things happen. I think where families get into trouble is, a year from now, what I said was a loan, you thought was a gift. And so, we start to have those kinds of disagreements. So it's really important, as awkward as it might be, when say you have an adult child that you think you're giving a $5,000 loan to, and they think is a $5,000 gift. Be really clear about what you think the terms and conditions are, and when you expect to see that money come back to you. When it goes the other way, when you're the borrower, make sure that you're clear that you're going to pay that back, or that it's iffy if you're going to be able to pay that back. And so, try to make those things as clear as they can. Oftentimes, people are in emergency and they don't take those steps. And that's what can lead to longer run conflicts within families.
And Michael, as we wrap up, what is the top thing you think we should keep in mind as we're trying to navigate these new waters financially?
I think the thing I would say is just be flexible. Don't panic. Don't read every day's stock report or every day's economic news and think that this is it. It's changing day by day. Our policies and programs are changing day by day. So, be flexible, be patient. If you're trying to get into the unemployment program or some of the other benefit programs or the loan programs, it's going to take a while, and sort of we have to work our way through these systems. So using that flexibility in terms of your own budgeting, in terms of your own financial decision making, and then just being patient with others and with the process that you're going through.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the advice you gave us today. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
This is J. Michael Collins. We've been talking with him. He's professor and director of the Center for Financial Security at the School of Human Ecology on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you'd like more information, you can go to covid19.wisc.edu. I'm Veronica Rickert, and this is Badger Talks.